We are at 12:41 a.m. in the morning on day 2,196 days since Richard was forcibly removed against his will from his barracks room in Building 2479 and taken downstairs to the basement room, which was the arms room, and directed by a code red, okay, because he was a whistleblower. They took him down there because they controlled that space. That was a restricted area. It's an arms room. You have to have special access to get in there. It's a soundproof room, and that's where they took him to take his life. And um, evidence indicates they took his organs, organ harvesting, and they desecrated, of course, his body, and they stole his body off of Fort Bliss. And through their network, through their cartel network, which includes mortuary operations, and trafficked his body over to Juarez, Mexico, right across the border. You could even walk there if you wanted to from Fort Bliss, and the evidence indicates that they disposed of his body at the Plenitude Narco Crematorium funeral home that is connected to Group Purchase, the Purchase Funeral Home. Um, uh, I would call it a monopoly there on the border when it comes to funeral homes. Big family business, I guess. I guess it's a big family business, and they're up to no good because they're also, evidence indicates that they are up to this funeral fraud, of course, but also the fuel theft. Their, group of purchase seems to be right there with the El Paso cartel. Alejandro de la Vega Foster, the operative and double agent and fuel thief. Of course, her husband is Paul Foster, with West Star Bank, with Beto O'Rourke's father-in-law, William Sanders, who, of course, is heavily invested in the storage area, right, in the premium basin area, that he's invested in that oil area anyway. Big time, big time. I mean, we're talking about uh, bigger than the size of Dallas. Um, and of course, they're, in alliance with Woody Hunt, um, big military contractor. And of course, today we're going to talk about Fort Bliss. We're going to talk about Fort Bliss and the barracks. And I've talked about it many, many times. There's so much going on, and I think because the information coming out about the generals, right? About the generals. Um, it's not a mistake that there are 44 generals. I don't know if 44 four-star generals. I don't know if that's quite right now. I don't know. I have to look that up, but I know that when all this happened, there were 44 four-star generals that were absolute traitors, absolute traitors. I just can't even express that enough. And now we know how bad it was. Now we know how bad it was because it's coming out that the generals, the flag officers, you can call them, um, that there were many of them that were communicating with China, right? Communicating with China, and of course the retired ones. and making deals, I guess, with China. I guess they wanted to be on a secret payroll. Like, Chihuahua payroll wasn't enough, right? The secret payroll in Chihuahua, Mexico wasn't enough. And we know that Marine General, um, John Kelly, who everybody, absolutely their heart goes out to him because he's a Gold Star father. We were all supporting him, but he turns out to be a real traitor, a real traitor. Bigger than Dallas, bigger than Dallas. What a traitor, because he went to go work for Maru Campos, who is absolutely a Sinaloa proxy. She is the El Chapo fentanyl governor, right across the border. And we know that General Kelly was working for her as a security advisor. And we know that she has a secret payroll with CIA and FBI and ATF and DEA and CBP, DHS, um, uh, and DPS, rogue agents on her secret payroll. And how could that be? And this is what has hurt Mexican and US relations, is when you have rogue intelligence agents that are on the payroll of the US government, um, uh, on the Chihuahuan secret payroll, uh, engaging in illegal, unauthorized operations in Mexico, right? Then, the Mexicans aren't too happy. Rightfully so. And Americans, if they only knew, I mean, Mexico sees it for themselves, has experienced it for themselves, but Americans are unaware of what was going on there. And we thought, okay, Iran Contra was handled. Fast and Furious was handled. And that all came out of El Paso. And it wasn't being handled, was it? It was being expanded. It was being expanded on a secret payroll. And they don't understand at least I didn't understand the history of Americans being in Chihuahua, Mexico. And who are those Americans? Well, they were polygamous Mormons that, settled over there in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and they set up shop in Chihuahua, and they're polygamous, so they have lots of wives and lots of children. And when you have 100 years of lots of wives and lots of children, then you have some resources, right? You have some resources. And of course, they are absolutely confirmed to be a big host of them to be a Mormon Mafia. Mormon Mafia in alliance with the Mexican cartel that have made, a lot of profit off of stolen fuel, trafficking, drugs, trafficking, children, trafficking, weapons, and don't believe me, it is just look at Fast and Furious, just look at Iran Contra, just look at all of the documented cases. I wasn't the one that coined Mormon Mafia. It was legal cases that coined the term Mormon Mafia for them, because they, of course, being dual citizen, a lot of them, they joined the intelligence agencies, the ATF and the DEA and the FBI and the CIA and DHS and even DPS, right? Even DPS, which is the Texas Rangers. And so who were the CIA agents that were recently killed in an ambush, that were on an unauthorized operation, that were on a secret payroll, and who are the lead agents, FBI agents, for the Walmart mass shooting that were absolutely running a debunked investigation, not securing the mass shooting crime scene for over 48 hours. And we know that it was all tampered with. We know that the Walmart mass shooting was orchestrated, bloody, very bloody, but orchestrated, and that there was a lot of tampering and obstruction and all kinds of nonsense going on. And the lead FBI agents, who were they? Right? Because they were in the Fiscalia, the exact place where rogue agents would be when they're on Maru Campus's, paid for by the Chihuahuan people, on her secret payroll, right? On the secret payroll. And of course, this payroll also was with Cesar Duarte, right? So this, is, documented. This is a nothing. Matter of fact, Maru Campos went on news, went on a media campaign, and her staff went absolutely crazy, because she did so bad, because she confessed that all of these rogue agents were on her secret payroll. And she confessed that they were conducting kidnappings, right? That they were conducting kidnappings. And this was something they did not want her to tell everybody because of the illegal kidnapping of Miles Zapata, Ismael El Miles Zapata, which was done in coalition, um, and led and ordered by FBI Connell Wetton, who went on TV and confessed to ordering the illegal kidnapping of Elmayo Zapata. And who is he? Connell Wetton, there in the FBI of El Paso. Well, they all have this common denominator, that they have attachments there from, they have connections to this Mormon mafia. I mean, Connell Wetton has a long family history. His family is intertwined with the Mitt Romney family, who's over there, in Chihuahua, Mexico. And, the thing is, they're, because of them being like foreigners in Mexico, right? They're just there for the polygamy. They're just there, which is, I don't recommend it. It just ends up in a sex cult. I'm not joking. And in the worst crimes, in the worst crimes ever, and just disaster for families. And how do I know this? Because of the 6-year investigation into all these families. It's a disaster. They're just make the world a terrible place. The deception, the lying, the always looking for a girlfriend, the always looking for a boyfriend, and then it descending into some sex cult where everything goes. And it's just, talk about ruining a humongous family, because they have humongous families. And then they're all like betrayed. They're all cynical. They're all ready to be deceivers and betray other people. And then they're in the CIA and FBI and ATF, and then you have all of this rogue where they're not patriots. They have no love. They have no tears in their eyes. And they're just after the power, after the money, after the crime. And so that's why you have billions and billions of barrels and dollars of stolen fuel to con people into buying the fuel because we all need fuel at a higher price. And then, of course, all the other fraud and all the other trafficking that leads to the fentanyl deaths, to all the rapes, all the, oh my gosh, all of the child harvesting, the organ harvesting, the um, the targeting of young women, and if they're pregnant, they really target them, and this support for Planned Parenthood, and it goes on and on, just one worse thing after. Oh, and like this is what Richard was warning about. He was warning the young girls there not to be led by these older women, these this older, they would say, they say they support you, they say they respect you, but they don't. They don't. They want you to go on old. They want to groom you for OnlyFans. They want to groom you to sell yourself, to go on to, if you're 14, you can go and live on Fort Bliss in the barracks and be pimped out, right? They want to, but and the guys, they don't respect you. They're just horny. They just want to see you naked. That's on audio. Richard warning these young girls because these young girls were being targeted, right? And groomed, and absolutely groomed. And what they were doing is putting them on Fort Bliss. Um, these um, these manipulators, these deceivers, and they happen to be from this Mormon mafia. Okay. Lalani Hart is from, she's part of the Mormon mafia. CID, Tavita Nusa, Mormon mafia. Connell Wetton, Mormon mafia. And of course, David Frost, who was the FBI agent in charge of the Walmart mass shooting, but also at the same time, an NCO on Fort Bliss in 1AD under Sean Bernabe in the headquarters, artillery, right? Right there. And what is he? Mormon Mafia. So this is, and their records show it. And, it's not something I'm making up. I'm not making it up at all. And now the reports are coming out that, uh, you know, the generals, these trader generals, were in communication, making deals with China that were betraying the United States. And to know about Nova Casa Grandes, because that's like the big hub, right? The big hub for La Linea, the Mormon Mafia. And of course, you have all the colonies down there in Colonial Juarez, Colonial Dublin, Colonial um, Labaron or LeBaron, and it keeps going on, right? Where they're from, and you can tell by their surname, and then they, of course, have aliases because they know that we've caught on to them now and know them by their surname. Um, and yeah, so they're there, and I lost my train of thought what I was talking about, but uh, absolutely. Oh yeah, that they were grooming, sending, um, uh, these young girls onto Fort Bliss to compromise the soldiers. And of course, when you are in the barracks on Fort Bliss, you are a sitting duck for these evil people. that are in command, the 44 four-star generals, the 44 four-star generals that, Forcecom is gone now. Okay, just to let you know, Forcecom is gone now. President Trump disbanded Forcecom, which is like, wow, wow. And I will talk about that. But this is showing you that, I'm not making things up. This is what is happening, that these leaders, these 44 four-star generals that I was talking about years ago, because I knew that the evidence was showing that this was a code red, that they went after Richard for whistleblowing. And we had to debunk everything and collect all the evidence, and not just collect all the evidence, but then we had to go through it and identify the crimes, identify the truth through all of that, then document it, and then um, file it to, uh, you know, make sure that the record was on record, right? And so, 6 years of doing that over and over again, every day, every day. I mean, thousands of documents. I can tell you that they were compromising the soldiers on Fort Bliss, and the evidence shows it. And Richard, of course, being the distinguished honor graduate that he was, being a black belt, being a Christian, being a patriot, being the guidon bearer, being, who he is, uh, he did not fall for it, and he reported it. And that is all corroborated by what has happened, by the record. And so I want to talk about that today. That's what I really want to talk about, because it is just, crazy to hear what Lieutenant General Sean Bernabe, he's such a traitor and such a liar, right? And not because, I hold any bitter feelings for him. It doesn't make me happy at all that one of our generals, one of our flag officers in the United States military, over so many of our sons and daughters that volunteer, is a traitor, is so evil, is a liar. That doesn't make me happy at all. Right? And thank God he's been pushed out. Thank God he was pushed out into retirement, because he's not that old, and he got his stars pretty quick. And it's like, normally you would stay in, stay in, and stay in, but he's just, um uh babe, they are afraid of the Mormon mafia. Who's yeah, the Senate. Um is bad. Well, and I understand that. I understand, because the Mormon mafia are so bad. They are so bad, and they just don't think, they're not. They, thank God the Pentagon took them off of the Christian list. Okay, because for a long time they were placed on the Christian list, and they're not. They're not Christian. And the reason why I'm saying that is because there's a a thought, right? A culture that comes from being a Christian, and this is not them. Okay, they're not Trinitarian. Okay, that's huge, that they don't believe in God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Ghost, as uh, as what I would say Saint Athanasius, l- uh, that creed, which of course is an Augustinian creed, as that is laid out, that is the foundation of Christianity, right? To be Trinitarian, right? That Jesus is God, and that the Holy Ghost is God, and that God the Father is God, right? So, you know, and that they're one, but not to be mingled. not to be mingled, right? So it's kind of like a shamrock, right? It's kind of like three leaves on a shamrock. Um, so this is the basic foundation of Christianity, right? And of course, add to that the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, and they don't believe in the Apostles' Creed, and they don't believe in the Nicene Creed. And so they don't believe in the founding creeds, the Athanasius Creed, the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed. Those are the foundation. I believe, because the word creed comes from the word credo, meaning I believe. And that's why you start with I believe in, right? Um, when you're saying the Apostles' Creed and the Nicene Creed and the Athanasius Creed, it's what you believe in. And so there's a culture that comes out of what you believe in. And that is a totally different culture than what you get with the Mormon Mafia. Okay? They are absolutely deceivers. First and foremost, they are absolute liars and deceivers. Okay? And they are exploiters. Okay? They don't care if they exploit the poor, exploit the widow, exploit the children, exploit the woman. They don't care, okay? Because you know, they think like the beehive, okay? They think like the beehive that and that would be a long discussion with each one having a cell, and then you have the worker bees, and then you have the drones, and they have the queen bee, and that is Brigham Young's symbol, right, for Mormons. But then this polygamous group, that some of them are still in the United States. Of course, you have Mitt Romney that wanted to be he almost became president, right? This group that is from Chihuahua, they don't have a loyalty to Mexico, and they don't have a loyalty to the United States. And so they just exploit, and they exploit the intelligence community, right? They exploit the agencies, and you see that very clear with Connell Wetton. You see that very clear with David Frost. I mean, he has been accused of the worst type of crimes against women in gang fashion, right? In gang fashion. And you see that with the leadership there over Fort Bliss and what they did to Fort Bliss. And that's what I want to go into, because if they thought like Christians, if they were what they say, categorized as Christian, they would never have done what they did on Fort Bliss. Okay? Never. And they have really so much control over El Paso and Fort Bliss. Okay? They have so much control over it. And so you know them by their fruit. Okay? And the reason why I'm saying that they have control is because you know them by their fruit. You would not have the corrupt justice system there um, if they weren't trying to exploit by trafficking and fuel theft and all of that and all the deception, because the judges in the El Paso magistrate court are there deceptively, because they need to be elected to that position, and not one of them is. Not one of them is. And of course, we know that Montoya, Mr. 2028 stamp, is operating in deception, and that Bill Hicks operating in deception, and that the medical examiner there that was brought in by this same group, Mario Raskin Ortiz, that gets $500,000 a year of taxpayers' money, is operating in deception. He's not qualified for that position. It's all by deception. And so, and then you have the senior NCOs operating by deception. And now we have the 44 four-star generals with their flag officers that were operating in so much deception that President Trump, when he came in this second time, shut down Forcecom. Shut it down. Just totally shut it down. They go by, and I'm going to talk about it tomorrow. I'm really trying to, because I do all of this by memory, so I have to go through it several times to be able to discuss it on a live stream um, by memory, and it's really helpful because then if I lose a document or whatever, it doesn't matter. Even though our system is so fine tuned now, it is so fine tuned. But that I have it in. It's kind of like memorizing scripture, right? To memorize this case, to memorize the names, to memorize it, to be able to organize it, and then to analyze it. Just it's kind of like what AI does, right? That's what AI does, but a human does it with the power of the Holy Spirit. So it's much more effective. So to see what they did to Fort Bliss, it was all part of a playbook, right? Because if you're going to steal weapons, if you're going to steal fuel, if you're going to steal Humvees, if you're going to steal sealets, right? Sealets or these shipping containers, and shipping containers full of everything that you steal. It could be uniforms, it could be the bulletproof vests, it could be ammunition. It could be grenades, grenade launchers. This is all proven to have been stolen. Not me just saying it. It's already documented in cases and news stories. If it got covered in the news story, but in cases, MREs got stolen, right? Pallets and pallets and pallets of MREs got stolen by the same group as Nadal Baim, which is the father-in-law of Lieutenant Colonel Bradford Bugado in the G3 operations, right? Operations of the 32nd ADCOM, which is our son's, the same command. So all of this is documented, and I should have even put that in there, all the theft. But I really wanted to focus on the barracks because the reason why they targeted our volunteer sons and daughters who have no choice but to live in the barracks. They are sitting ducks. If the command is a Mormon mafia, if the command is traitors, right? Traitors against our country and in alliance with the cartel and are involved in the trafficking like they were absolutely, okay, because the evidence confirms it, that they were absolutely in alliance with the cartels, engaged in major criminal deception and I'm talking about forgery, forging papers and all of that. That is really part of all of this, because they cash in on veterans benefits and all of that. And then also on the theft, just the fuel theft and everything else. So they had to compromise our soldiers, make them so drunk, make them so drugged out, make them so sexed out, right? Sex them out. Um and totally, and all of that can make records, right? and they absolutely were bringing in 14-year-old girls to live in the barracks. That's, there's a guy in prison for it. And this wasn't the only time. And we had the command sergeant major telling me to my face that, we're standing there. Um, and, he's telling Richard's, well, I don't want to say, but, very, 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 very good friend that went, um, who understands the military. Okay. We are a military family. Our friends understand the military, have deep ties to the military and government, right? And so the command sergeant major Jackovitz, Shaky Jake, is telling this person that he didn't even know there was a missing soldier. She looked at him and she said, "You are an effing liar." You are right to his face, and not as nice as I just said it. Um, and and rightfully so, rightfully so. And he was absolutely lying, because then he told me to my face and others that were there that they were bringing in young girls during the lockdown. You know why? Fauci, the Fauci liar created a lot of lockdowns, right? Especially on military bases. And but that's okay. That's okay for the command sergeant major, because he brought in young girls that they could bring in maybe some contraband, maybe some, other substances uh, during that time to party. And I don't know. I don't know if they stood 6 feet apart during the partying. I don't know in the barracks. But I do know that they were binge drinking. I do know that there was worse type of crimes against women, worse type of crimes against children. I know that there was unregistered, unlawful weapons, and not just one or two, but that because Brigadier General James Stewart told me to my face, with others there, that the barracks were flush with illegal, unlawful weapons. Okay. And then we find out, uh, that's all on record, right? That's when we were there. And then even at that time, they knew all of this, right? And then all of a sudden, we have, uh, the worst type of crimes against women. We have one of those women that died in the barracks while we were there. I don't think it was while we were there. Soon after we left. Very soon, because I think it was on New Year's Eve that she died. And I'm talking about Asia Grant. So, and that's on record. The 14-year-old living in the barracks for 4 months being pimped out, that's on record. That happened afterwards. The soldiers, 11 of them, that were poisoned by drinking uh, from a sealet. Okay, so what does that mean? They're drinking. They have a storage unit that they're partying out of while they're in the field during a training exercise, and they're drinking grog. Now, if you're in the military, you understand, and you say WTH. WTH, right? What kind of leadership is this? Then we find out that the health inside the barracks um, is threatened because there's mold and mildew and no air condition, no ventilation, pests and rats and that the sewage is backed up. Who has this housing? Most of the housing is contracts is from Woody Hunt. Okay, Woody Hunt. I don't think that the Mormon Mafia has a love for our soldiers because the barracks were unfit to live in, and then it was full of drugs and contraband and weapons. Just in the Bulldog health and welfare search after the shooting with using unlicensed weapons. That happened afterwards. That happened afterwards. So here we're there looking, doing our rallies, looking for our son for months. And the general tells us, oh, the weapons the barracks were just flush with weapons. And then the CID, Marlon Soto, says it wasn't just Richard's barracks, it was all the barracks on Fort Bliss. Oh, okay. That doesn't make it better. That makes it worse. But coming from Marlon Soto, who is a total criminal, um, anyway, yeah, don't even, I talked to him for so many hours, y'all, and wow, he's a total criminal. So we're there, they're telling us this, and then 2 years later, they have, you know, hundreds of thousands of children being trafficked, an organ harvesting, a baby harvesting, a unbelievable tunnel trafficking, Fast and Furious on steroids, Iran Contra and money laundering, and through the VA, all kinds of fraudulent going on. And then you have a shooting and unlicensed guns all over the Bulldog barracks. And even dogs living in the barracks. One dog was dead when they went in there to inspect. They had a python. And, and then a 14-year-old girl living in the barracks. And so now, so now you just have these cases that now, even this last month in July, you have one of those soldiers that opened fire with unregistered guns, pleading guilty. The other one starts this September 1st, 2026, his trial. But this one pleaded guilty, got life in prison with a chance of parole. And, but, he killed two people with weapons that weren't even lawful. And being a soldier, I, I, I think they went too easy on him because this is the same environment that produced a code red from a whistleblower, my son, who didn't like what was going on, reported it like he should, and they blocked his reports. He asked for a transfer then. They denied him to be transferred. Where was he going to go then? He's stuck in those barracks with, and this is another report that came out, that a lot of the door locks were broken. So you couldn't even lock your door. You weren't even had any kind of safety. So, for him to be forcibly removed against his will, it's documented that a lot of those locks didn't work. But of course, it was a code red. And I'm sure the platoon leader, Dallas Hart, had, maybe a skeleton key. So, and I know because my son told me that there's no way that he's going to leave his room. He was so afraid to leave his room. And I'm like confused. I was confused. And of course, it was during that whole Fauci time. And because Richard was a black belt, Richard knew how to defend himself. He could take a broomstick and make a weapon out of it. It was just um this was his command he was afraid of. And, he can't go and get an apartment and live off base. That's not allowed. So the violations against him are just so numerous because they had him like in a prison. And he didn't sign up to be in a prison. So, the barrack situation with the sex cult activity, that ended up killing women and trafficking children and the guns that ended up killing people. And they had plenty of notice. That was my point. They knew when we were there. And still years later under Biden, with all of our reports, with all of our uh, you know, communications of what was happening in the barracks, the worst type of crimes against women were happening, the worst type of crimes against men, pouring liquor down their throats and doing, whatever. And then they end up in the hospital because they end up drinking antifreeze. And let me tell you, antifreeze on your lungs, you're never the same. You cannot totally heal from that. And let's not even talk about the mental damage this does. To live in fear. They made Asia Graham live 2 doors down from her perpetrator. She wanted to be removed because the barracks were co-ed, y'all. They had this weird thing that they didn't know what a woman was. They didn't know what a man was. And now, starting in 2025, right when President Trump got in, he started working on it. And they have the first ever regulations that have changed how they do business in the barracks. And women need to have their safe spaces or their separate spaces, and men need to have their safe and separate spaces. And there has to be a peephole on every door that goes out to a corridor, and all the locks must work. And there has to be a 100 to 100% inspection all the time. And this is the thing, they weren't inspecting. It was just a pop out, like, oh, well, we had a couple of soldiers that used unregistered weapons that killed a couple people, injured 4 more. And maybe now we need to do a health and welfare inspection. And oh, wow. over 70 weapons we're finding, and a dead dog, and a python, and a 14-year-old girl living in the barracks. What? Yeah, it is. And, I'm looking at this here like we're supposed to accept this. We're supposed to be living in reality. See, this is uh, the unchristian kind of thinking, because a Christian says, "How can I make the world better? How can I fight for justice?" Which is synonymous with righteousness. How can I glorify God in everything that I do and bring his kingdom on earth as it is in heaven? You see, this is, it's not about what do I want. It's how can we help? How can we make the world a better place? How can we prevent this kind of crime? And not even prevent it, but even if it just is shaving off as much risk as we can, you know, putting stumbling blocks in front of the devil instead of the devil putting stumbling blocks in front of us. And so that means there has to be accountability, there has to be transparency, there has to be light shined on all of this, because we don't want any family to go through what we've gone through. We don't want any of our volunteer sons and daughters, and I even put a blind spot up to this of thinking about what Richard went through, because it's just too devastating. I got that wonderful video, and people say, "Oh, you should play that." And I said, "I don't know if my heart can take it to play it often." So if you share it, thank you so much, because it is really moving. The little kid videos of Richard with the crackers in our kitchen, um, out in the lawn. I mean, it's just, it makes you think about what they did to him. And we don't want anyone to go through that. And so who's responsible? Well, I can tell you right now, these mortuary operation, Mormon mafia with the cartels, with the El Paso cartel, Connell Wetton leaked Richard's identity to the cartel. The cartel infiltrated onto Fort Bliss, engaging in operations on Fort Bliss to deceive, to exploit, to steal, and to compromise. And that's where all the sex cult stuff comes. The drugs and the alcohol, the parties, and yeah. So, yeah, so the evidence corroborates everything Richard was reporting. People can say, "Oh, nothing was like Sean Bernabe, the general. Oh, everything's just peachy." We left that meeting. We were in Virginia. Um, Went to the VTC meeting of the 15-6. And, we left there thinking, Oh my gosh, he is so cartel. He is so cartel. What else could he be? He is absolutely a traitor, or he's one that is what is coming out in the news now, that these generals and flag officers and 44 four-star generals, that they were in cahoots with the Chinese Communist Party, doing some favorable stuff for the enemy that turns them into traitors. And we've called them treasonous traitors for a long time. And treasonous traitors need to be court-martialed and face the ultimate punishment. That is what needs to happen. Because we're just going to descend into a very hellish hole of nightmarish behavior if we don't hold these people accountable. And it's just too bad that they also have projected, because if you control Disney, if you control, um, the media and that, um, and you are putting forth your beliefs, and your beliefs are the Mormon Mafia beliefs, not the Mary helped the old blind man cross the street kind of beliefs. Um, the Apostles' Creed kind of beliefs, the Nicene Creed kind of beliefs, the Golden Rule, right? The Golden Rule, the Ten Commandments. Then you have people that don't understand. If they have a deception, that stealing is okay and deception is okay, forgery is okay, desecration of human remains is okay, sacrilege is okay. If that's what they believe in, they can leave human bodies rotting as long as they get insurance money from it. And multiple insurance payouts for, how many insurance payouts did you get for that dead body over there that had signs of torture? Or, oh well, maybe just two, but the one that's wearing the uniform, I got 3 for that one. I mean, if that's the way they think, we're in big trouble. And this Jose Luis of the Plenitude Narco Crematorium, part of this whole thing with group of purchase, totally in deception. Oh, yes, give me your money and I will give you a plastic urn full of construction dust, or, you know, pulverized cat litter or whatever. Oh, yeah. You know, and we don't hold him accountable. If we don't hold someone like that, letting hundreds of bodies pile up, taking, because evidence indicates that our son's dismembered remains ended up there. Because, if they have part of someone, they can say, oh, this is an unaccounted for an unnamed migrant, and we can collect on this part of this body. Or maybe they sell it. Maybe they sell it into our university system or our science system, because Fauci's all about science, right? They deny the sunshine purity. They deny crystal clean water. They deny clean air. They deny the love of a family getting together. They deny the health of what worship does, what prayer does, what unction does, the sacraments, right? The Lord's Supper and the baptism. Baptism Baptism doesn't, God didn't choose water as the element of baptism for nothing. It is healthy, spiritually and physically. And God didn't make confession a sacrament if he meant for deception to be the norm. So, what was going on in the barracks was a group of very conniving, deceiving, cultish individuals that were setting the standard, the low, the the destruction of our military community. And the evidence is plain to see. Thank you so much, Enrique, for coming on and all your comments. Um, yeah, I'm just grateful that people are listening at this time of night. And thank you, Anicia, so much for your love and your prayers, because we're almost at 2 o'clock a.m. But this was really important because this corroborates Richard's whistleblowing, and it corroborates that it was a code red, corroborates that the leadership was working for the enemies and not for the United States, and they weren't working for Mexico. And I hope that people understand that we have been deceived on both sides of the border, and that there's been mutiny on both sides of the border. And over these last years, we have a very good idea of who they are. And so I just please share that information. And thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I will be back tomorrow, God willing. Thank you. Bye bye.